Good, happy Monday morning, June 1st, 2020. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this Monday morning edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. We have a lot of news to get to this Monday morning, so let's begin. First up, let's take a look at your COVID-19 in New Hampshire information, what you need to know. Let's start with that right now. And here is a look at that information for all of you right now. There are 4,651 number of people in New Hampshire have tested positive for COVID-19. 1,837,170 number of people in the United States have tested positive. 245 number of deaths from COVID-19 in New Hampshire. 451 number of people who have been hospitalized with COVID-19 in New Hampshire. And 195 number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States. This map of New Hampshire right here shows you where current cases of COVID-19 are. Manchester, 434. And this map of New Hampshire shows you where total cases of COVID-19 are. Manchester, 1183. Now let's take a look at these three charts here. Let's start with the first chart, new cases each day in New Hampshire. In the purple, daily new positive COVID-19 cases. In the orange, new hospitalizations. And in the red are the deaths. Let's take a look at this chart here, current cases. In the purple, total current COVID-19 cases. And in the orange, current hospitalizations. And let's take a look at this chart here, total cases. In the purple, total positive COVID-19 cases. In the orange, total hospitalizations. In the red, deaths. And in the blue, recovered. Now let's take a look at this chart here. Age group of cases. Female and male of cases. And risk information. And now let's take a look at this chart here. Race/ethnicity of cases. Hospitalizations. Deaths, and percent of New Hampshire population. And your common symptoms: fever, lack of smell, cough, chills, and difficult breathing. How it spreads, and prevention tips. And be sure to stay with the Riley King Network for the latest of your COVID-19 information. Suspect dead in Gilmington shooting. Scene cleared after evacuation. Let's take a listen to that video from WR News 9.
These are truly challenging times, but New Hampshire companies are here and open for business.
Knowles Tree Service is open for business.
We are following more breaking news tonight, this time in Gilmanton, where a SWAT situation is unfolding at this hour. WMUR's Tim Callery is live at that scene with what we're learning right now. Tim?
Well, Sharice, this was happening here on Lakeshore Drive that runs along Shell Camp Pond, if you're familiar with this area. But I have to say, just a few minutes ago, we saw a series of police cruisers, first responders, and tactical teams start to leave this area. So that gives some indication that officials may have a handle on what happened here this evening. Right now, officials aren't providing too much information, only saying that they were dealing with some sort of incident here on Lakeshore Drive. Residents who live in this neighborhood were told to shelter in place. Some were even evacuated from their homes. Now, there were several police departments at this scene from a number of surrounding towns as well as throughout the state. We saw the SWAT team here as well as the Sheriff Department's Incident Command Center. Now, residents in this neighborhood we talked to earlier today say they heard what sounded like gunshots this afternoon. They said they heard more gunshots after police arrived here, adding that it was a pretty frightening ordeal.
All of a sudden, we heard a shot, and it wasn't a firecracker. All parents came running out of the house, started grabbing kids, running into the houses. It was very, very scary.
A whole row of vehicles coming down the street. They started arming up with riot equipment, helmets, as well as riot rifles.
Police officers in that special vehicle told us to get back in the house and lock the doors. So we sat there for over an hour, long time, and happened to notice everything going on, helicopters. It was pretty interesting.
But again, it appears that police now have a handle on whatever this situation was, as we saw a number of cruisers and first responders leave this scene a short time ago. We are expecting to receive some information from Gilmanton Police. Of course, we'll have that on our mobile app and website as soon as it becomes available. We'll also have more information on News 9 Daybreak. For now, we are live here in Gilmanton. I'm Tim Callery, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. At least 7 officers hurt, 40 arrests as Boston protests turn violent. Looting scene. Crowd destroys police vehicles. Let's take a listen to that video from WCVB Boston.
There was a tumor the size of a softball attached to her kidney. It was a very aggressive.
Erica, you can probably hear the alarm sounding right now from all these retail stores that have been badly damaged. In fact, this is the UGG store here, the whole front smashed. You can see the glass on the ground. And if we look over here to the side, this is the barber store. And this one has another damaged glass. Someone threw something right through the front window here. And you can see all the looters pulled things out because a lot of the material's on the ground right here. In fact, I think that's a lamppost that they used. Now, this was the scene at the height of the violence. A police cruiser set on fire in the heart of downtown at Tremont and Park Streets. A short time later, we saw scene after scene of people smashing into stores and running off with whatever they could grab in downtown Crossing, on Newberry Street, also at the Copley Mall. And some people we talked to clearly frustrated that what started with peaceful protest turned into crime and chaos.
The protest that was earlier, it was beautiful. There was nothing. It was just people, even, the police was acknowledging, whatever. Everything was fine.
As Boston police struggled to contain the looting and violence, the National Guard moved in, marching through the streets with armored vehicles to restore peace, And actually, the National Guard was here. They left just a short time ago, as you look at that damage here outside the barber store. Police tell us 7 injured officers were taken to the hospital. A total of 21 of their vehicles were damaged. As for arrests, 40 have been announced as of 3 o'clock in the morning. We do expect potentially that number to be updated throughout the day. We're live on Back Bay. Josh Brigadier, WCVB News Center.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Hundreds of people gathered in Portland to protest death of George Floyd. Let's take a listen to that video from WMTW News 8 Maine.
Senior shoutouts.
I'm really happy about the turnout. This is amazing. It's been at least like 3 hours we've been out here.
Hundreds of protesters stretched across the city of Portland Sunday, marching in response to the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which sparked similar demonstrations across the country. It was the third day in a row in Portland. Sunday, crowds first gathered at City Hall, holding signs and chanting familiar refrains of Black Lives Matter and I Can't Breathe.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
A phrase heard after the death of Eric Garner on Staten Island, New York, nearly 6 years ago, which protesters say bears a troubling similarity to the Floyd case.
This has never ended. It's still continuing. It's just now starting to become a bigger deal now that more people are talking about it.
The crowd filled with Mainers young and old, but Chada Chuen says young people have an opportunity to make their voices heard.
And it really, spoke out to people. It really made people, to notice that something is wrong with our system and that we have to do something about it.
At one point, demonstrators marched in two separate groups, blocking intersections, while Portland police officers followed along, halting traffic as the marchers passed by. Some participants applauded Portland Police's presence Sunday, but said the country is in need of large-scale changes.
It's this whole idea of maybe there should be different levels of engagement. Maybe there should be different training.
And as we join you live now, we want to share an open letter to the community Friday. Portland Police and its chief, Frank Clark, said in part, "You should know that the Portland Police Department has policies and strategies in place in order to prevent such a tragedy from happening here," speaking of the Floyd death. Going on to say, "We will continue our efforts to critically assess and critique our policies, training, and procedures, seeking to align with recognized best practices." Now, rejoining here at Middle and Pearl Street, some groups remain spread across several different intersections. Some have been laying down, blocking those intersections to traffic. Earlier on, the large crowd was gathered out in front of the Portland Police Department, where officers did come outside to try to address the crowd. Of course, several people gathering there, but now have dispersed, and cruisers remain at many of those intersections. Some demonstrators having conversations with the police department right now, but as we said, they are spread across several different downtown intersections, some of which have been blocked off as they hope to get their message out of what they believe to be changes that need to be made when it comes to police interaction with minorities and communities all across the country, so they do plan to remain here for the time being. Live in Portland, Joe Glauber, WMTW News 8.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. George Floyd protest updates. Demonstration escalates into some clashes. Looting again in NYC. Thousands of protesters march again in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC7 NY.
The Volvo XC90 plug-in hybrid.
Protesters filled the Manhattan Bridge earlier this evening on their way from Brooklyn to Manhattan, and they stopped traffic for about an hour. Hundreds of protesters also spent this afternoon and evening in front of both Atlantic Center and Barclays Center. Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan continues our coverage from the scene. Jim?
An enormous and determined crowd of demonstrators here in Brooklyn tonight. This has been quiet most of the night. I want you to take a look right over here. They're pushing demonstrators back on Atlantic and Flatbush Avenues here. There have been a couple of arrests here. And if you just look at some videotape from about 20 minutes ago, this was quiet all night long. And then somebody threw a bottle. It looked like to us that somebody threw a bottle and the crowds began to scatter. The police moved in. And that is the kind of fluid, dynamic night it has been in Brooklyn tonight.
Black Lives Matter!
They shut down the Manhattan Bridge tonight. An enormous crowd of angry, peaceful demonstrators who marched from the Barclays Center headed to Manhattan. As the sun began to set, the police looked on from the perimeter. There were some arrests at Flatbush and 6th Avenue, but with police looking on from above, early on, this was a passionate but peaceful crowd, filled with people eager to be heard in a world that has so often to them turned a deaf ear.
We deserve to be treated just like you. My skin color doesn't reflect how I should be treated as a human being. He is a human just like me.
We're not domestic terrorists. We don't want to loot. That's not what we out here for. But we do want justice, and we want equality. And if we don't get that, we're going to be out here.
I am angry. I am extremely angry. But I see you, I hear you, and I want to better understand where you're coming from. How do you view this as a police officer? How do you feel about the situation? And what are you going to do about it?
It was a diverse group, many of the white people in the crowd admitting they have been silent, and so culpable for too long.
White people need to stop being silent about our racism and complicit in the structural racist system in which we live and the white supremacy in which this country was built and continues to be upheld by people like me.
Justice and prosperity, that's all black people want.
There was, to be sure, plenty of anger in Brooklyn tonight, but when the crowd thinned out at Barclays, we saw also this: demonstrators and police officers talking, conversations, respectful on both sides.
A lot of them feel us, but they can't say anything, and that's the problem. Is that they're limited to voice their opinions when something is wrong and when they can help. So we were just trying to get their opinion on that.
I'm just happy she took the time out to understand, and I just wish that every other cop would do such, would take out the time to talk to the public.
We are back live now. You can see police officers moving towards the crowd right now. I just want to talk about something John Miller, the deputy commissioner in charge of the counterterrorism of the NYPD, said this evening. He said, well-organized groups of agitators have infiltrated protests in New York City, moving gasoline and rocks and glass bottles, scouting locations for vandalism, communicating through encrypted apps. These small groups are directing protesters to unprotected police cars to set them ablaze. And of course, as we know, many police vehicles have been set on fire in the last 4 days of protests. Again, a largely peaceful demonstration tonight. There have been instances and flare-ups. And of course, it's 11 o'clock. We'll keep an eye on things through the evening.
Okay, there you go on that video and that report. More fires set in D.C. Sunday as George Floyd protests continue into a third day. Demonstrations continued Sunday in D.C. with protesters moving through the streets and to the White House, demanding justice for George Floyd. Generally peaceful daytime protests turned chaotic when night fell on the nation's capital, just like happened on Saturday. The Associated Press reports that the entire Washington, D.C. National Guard, roughly 1,700 soldiers, was being called in to help control the protests Sunday evening, according to two Defense Department officials who insisted on anonymity because they were not authorized to publicly discuss the matter. Floyd, a black man who died on Memorial Day after a white officer kneeled on his neck for several minutes. That officer, Derek, was arrested Friday afternoon and charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. Floyd being detained over the alleged use of a fake $20 bill. One protester told ABC 7, "It isn't about black versus white," she said. "This is about human rights." The march began at Howard University, but the university said it did not endorse the protest. Here are some photos from the protests from a reporter from ABC7 in DC. As you can see, the group of protests. ABC7 reports that there was one tense moment in which protesters broke down a barrier at the White House, but it was otherwise calm. Here are some more images. On Saturday evening, peaceful protests turned chaotic with buildings and cars being set on fire and buildings being broken into and looted. We saw some businesses taking precaution Saturday afternoon in care. Things turned destructive again Sunday night. DC Police Chief on Sunday afternoon thanked some demonstrators and outlined the damage done by others. He also said the Metropolitan Police Department made 17 arrests Saturday night into Sunday, and 11 officers were injured. He also said was on scene on the street by ABC7 news crew Sunday evening. And here are some more images from the scene. Take a look. Also, Sunday evening, DC Mayor declared that there would be a citywide curfew from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. in DC. Around 10:30 p.m., ABC News crew started seeing fires being set for a second night, and as you can see, some fires there. So, a second night in the DC area of chaotic protest. Seven arrested in connection to building damage, looting at North Hills Triangle Town Center during George Floyd protests. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC 11.
Seniors, post pictures and encouraging messages on your social media pages with hashtag ABC11 Class of 2020.
Good morning to you, John. You know, we were over there at that mall this morning talking with officers, and they said that the mall did not get hit, but that is private property, so it is going to be closed off to folks. However, that is not the complete case in around the surrounding areas. This is the Dick's Sporting Good. I had the opportunity to speak with the manager here, and they said they had been in contact with Raleigh Police Department prior to what we saw yesterday. So through the information that they had, they opted to close up early and see these boards that you see here, but that did not completely keep them away from destruction. Overnight, around 1:30 or so, we know that people were out here. You can see the glass down here, really just how much there is. People were out here doing really what they did in other parts of the triangle that we have been seeing. So that's really the story here. We're also told by Raleigh Police Department that potentially the Target, which is just down the way, was also hit. We're going to check that out along with North Hills this morning, and we will keep you updated on everything. Meanwhile, talking to the manager here at Dick's, she said that they're going to be closed down today. They're really going to wait it out and see how the situation develops. If you want to support Dick's, though, the other ones in the triangle are going to be open. John and Barbara.
Okay, and there you go. So another night of chaotic scenes in North Carolina as well. Fire, gunshots, looting reported in West Palm Beach, Florida, following day of protest. Police responded to a Best Buy store in West Palm Beach following reports of fire at the store. The fire started while protesters were near the area. The protesters started just after 3 p.m. in downtown West Palm Beach, where demonstrators were marching through the streets of downtown for racial equality and for justice of George Floyd, who was killed by a police officer in Minneapolis on Monday. It's unclear if there are any injuries at the time. Unfortunately, the situation has distinguished, said the mayor in a phone call to WPBF 25 News. A couple of Greek squad cars were set on fire. There's been reports of gunfire, and there's been some break-ins in the Palm Beach outlet malls. Santa Monica declares curfew after looting. Fires break out blocks away from protest. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC 7.
Science, matched by no.
Out in local communities across Southern California this afternoon and this evening, and sadly, much of it was lawlessness and looting.
Veronica Miracle, live now on our newsroom with some of the images captured in too many places earlier today. Veronica?
Mark and Colleen, it's really disheartening to see, but we have to show you all of this, to show you all the destruction that's happening in the different communities from really criminals separate from the protesters. Let's start in Santa Monica. Now, the protest started at around noon, but then this chaos started shortly after, and people were just taking advantage of the situation as the police were engaged with the protesters. You saw just groups of people with getaway cars. This team right here, they were actually working together. All four of these cars seem to be in communication with each other. People from the cars were going back and forth, and we also saw people taking either their license plates off or they had coverings over them. So that was in Santa Monica. There just so much destruction, and a lot of people just taking off with boxes and boxes of shoes. A lot of shoes being stolen today. Now let's head over to Long Beach. Now this was truly a startling scene. This is a store called Outfitters, and police had barricaded or gotten to the front door, and so looters, they started smashing the windows because they were trapped inside. As you can see, it was a boarded up shop, and right here, you're going to see after this man gets out, clothing just being tossed over that plywood and protesters coming out continually as police stand by and watch. There was really not much that they could do. This camera is going to pan over to the left and you'll be able to see that. And let's head over to San Bernardino now. And San Bernardino, we saw some destruction as well in the Inland Empire. There's a dumpster on fire there, and it appears that these looters were at a strip mall and possibly getting into a pharmacy. There's a dentist next door, so we're trying to still figure out if they got into the pharmacy itself, but you can see the gates there smashing in, police standing by, watching on, and they were able to get inside that pharmacy. You can see here so many people just on top of each other, and then they pull out what appears to be a safe from this particular business. In a moment here, you'll see that once people start to climb in and out of these businesses. Yeah, there it is on the ground there, safe there. We don't know if there was money, possibly opioids, because this could have been a pharmacy, and they took off. And finally tonight, there was a brawl. Now, this happened in the Bay Area in Walnut Creek. And here you see looters fighting over the items that they stole. People stealing items from other thieves. Quite incredible here. And then you see, again, a getaway car. So this organized crime that has obviously been planned. And then take a look at that car. They just shove as much clothing as they can into the trunk.
in the front there as well, and then they will eventually take off. Now, we have heard that there have been hundreds of arrests in Santa Monica. We know that there were hundreds of arrests in Los Angeles. We'll bring you more of that information as soon as we get it.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. So another chaotic scene in the California area. Stock features are flat as Wall Street struggles to extend May's strong gains. U.S. stock features were little changed early Monday after consecutive monthly gains. More than 5,000 National Guard troops on duty in Minneapolis. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC News.
Meantime, in Minneapolis tonight, the curfew is in effect for a third night now. More than 5,000 National Guard troops on duty. George Floyd's brother has now arrived in the city, his family seeking justice, and we talked with his brother right here tonight. He told our Alex Perez that the other 3 officers should be charged, as investigators there now look at new video showing the moments before George Floyd's death. Alex Perez from Minneapolis, again tonight.
Tonight, investigators looking at new video showing what appears to be the minutes before George Floyd was pinned to the ground and died. Floyd can't be seen in the video, but you can see one officer leaning into the police car scuffling. Floyd's family speaking out tonight, calling for charges to be filed against the other officers involved.
I want to see justice. I want to see all of them get punished to the full extent for what they did to my brother. Please, I can't breathe.
Fired Officer Derek Chauvin, seen here in that horrific video, jamming his knee into Floyd's neck while he's pinned on the ground handcuffed, now on suicide watch, charged with third-degree murder. No charges so far for the other 3 officers involved.
Do you want to see the other 3 officers charged?
Yes, I think from what I've seen in all this, I do think that. I'll let the prosecutors and the folks decide. I do think that's warranted.
Tonight, authorities in Minnesota extending the evening curfew for a third night, shutting down freeways and mass transit, and deploying more than 5,000 National Guard troops. Last night, no major destruction or significant fires after dozens of buildings and businesses were reduced to rubble. The owner of this restaurant destroyed by vandals, vowing to rebuild, saying she supports the demonstrations.
This was the only way to get the attention of the people running the system to bring justice, then so be it.
The community coming together tonight, breaking out brooms, determined to pick up the pieces.
David, his brother Terrence adamantly and emotionally condemns the violence. He says George stood for peace. He worries the violence will overshadow his legacy. David?
George Floyd's family condemning the violence tonight with our Alex Perez. Alex, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And thank you for joining us for this morning edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great rest of your Monday, everyone, and I'll see you back here later on today for another newscast. I'll have a news report coming up in a little bit. Goodbye.